You sent for me, Your Grace. What can I do for you? Yes, it is quite late. Almost midnight, I believe. So I did expect Your Grace to be asleep. Is anything the matter? Your Grace is worried about tomorrow. That is perfectly understandable. Tomorrow is an important day, one that might determine Your Grace's whole future. And there is a lot of important guests arriving, nobles from across the realm. Your Grace needs a good night's rest. Oh, I see. Tomorrow's big event is the reason Your Grace can't fall asleep. I can see how the anticipation might, in and of itself, prevent a good night's rest. Is that why Your Grace has sent for me, and not someone else? I did take the liberty of bringing a sleeping draught. Yes, well, I am the castle herbalist, so it would not be too far-fetched to assume Your Grace's intention in summoning me late at night. Oh, it's quite simple. Herbal tea with chamomile and lemon balm, with a bit of sweetness added, and just a touch of magic. It's not very strong. It will not knock Your Grace out completely, but it will help Your Grace relax and let go of any mental tension or anxiety. It will tip the scales in favor of sleep. I will leave the cup right here. Your Grace should let it cool for just a few minutes, and then sip it slowly. I'm afraid the tea is rather slow working. It will need some time to take effect. Is there anything else Your Grace requires of me tonight? My company? I'm not quite sure what Your Grace is alluding to. Oh, I understand. Simply my presence in the room until sleep arrives. I will sit by Your Grace's bed then and knit or read for a while. Is that satisfactory? A bedtime story? I don't know many stories, Your Grace, but perhaps I shall think of one. No, I don't think the request is childish. Not at all. The comforts of childhood can still be helpful later in life. The familiarity can be soothing. And perhaps a story can distract your mind and relax it enough for you to drift off. Your Grace might not be aware, but my duties have changed quite a bit over the years. When I first arrived here, I was hired to serve in the kitchen, to help with cooking and treat any sickness or injury among the staff. Kitchen staff, stables, and the gods as well. One day, your mother, the queen, sent for me. Her physician's remedies had failed to cure her headaches, and she was willing to try one of mine. I managed to help her that day, and from then on, I have been called upon to complement the treatments of your own physician from time to time. I'm glad that your grace thought of me tonight. A suitable bedtime story has come to mind, I think. It is a story I heard not too long ago. It is a strange one, and a bit sad as well. If your grace wishes, I will tell it. Very well. Long ago, there were two young men who were the best of friends. Their friendship was so strong that they swore to one another that not even death would end it. The friendship, I mean. One of them died while he was still quite young, and the other fellow visited his grave often and spoke to him in the same manner they had talked before, told him of his life, of old acquaintances, and whatever news he had to tell. Sometime later, the fellow was getting married, and when the wedding day arrived, he went to his friend's grave again, knocked on the gravestone, and called for him. He knocked and shouted for quite some time, and after a long while, the grave opened, and his friend stepped out. "It was a good thing you finally came," the living fellow said, "as I've been standing here knocking and calling for you for a long time." "I was far away," the dead friend said, "so I didn't hear you properly at first. Why have you called me here?" "Today is my wedding day," the living friend said, "and we promised each other to always be friends and to come to each other's weddings, no matter what, no matter how far away from each other we would end up. And such promises cannot be broken, especially those sworn on a gold ring at Yule or midsummer or some other night heavy with magic. There are many stories about the tragedies that ensues from breaking such a promise, but this is not one of those stories, for the dead friend was happy to come along and went to the wedding as a guest. The bride and groom were dressed in the traditional wedding outfit, and the bridal crown was a sight to be seen, worthy of royalty almost, and alive with countless little leaf-shaped pieces of silver and gold. In the breeze they sounded like the gentle rustling of summer trees. The sound of such a crown is said to chase away bad spirits and grant the newlyweds a happy wedding day. But when the ceremony was over and it was almost time for dinner. The dead man got up from his seat and declared that he intended to leave. "I cannot stay too long in this world," he said. "I have to get back to my grave." And the living friend, now a married man, left his bride for just a little while to walk his dead friend back to his grave. As they were walking along, the groom asked his friend what the next world was like, and if he had seen many strange and remarkable things there. "Yes, I certainly have," the dead man replied. "I have seen many a strange sight since I died." "It would be interesting to take a look," said the groom, "to visit you, now that you have visited me." "That could be done," the dead man said, "but you might be gone a while." I do not know what inclined the young groom to accept there and then, but he did. He loved his young wife, but perhaps it was too painful to be parted from his old friend so soon. Or perhaps he had, by some spell or influence, forgotten for a moment that he had other commitments. Whichever it was, he followed his friend back into the grave. But before they descended, the dead man tore a part of the topsoil off the ground, with a tuft of grass still attached, and laid it on his friend's head, so he would be almost like a dead man himself, partially buried, and then he could enter the grave. They both stepped in and descended. They traveled far through darkness, through a rugged marshland filled with thorns and withered trees. After a while, they arrived at a great gate, and it opened when the dead man reached out his hand and touched it. They passed through the gate, and the landscape slowly brightened around them. First, it was like a moonlit night, but eventually it was bright as day, and they were surrounded by tall trees, flowers, and beautiful pastures. It was a pleasant and delightful land, and they wandered through it happily. The grass was lush and plentiful. The livestock that grazed there seemed to be starving. They were just skin and bones, and despite of all they had to eat, and eat they did, ceaselessly. They seemed to be ravenously hungry. "How can it be," the groom asked, "that these animals are so skinny and hungry when they have so much to eat?" "This place," his friend answered, "is a parable of those who are never satisfied, no matter how much they have, and always yearn for more and more." The two friends continued their journey, Eventually, the landscape became more mountainous, and they were now hiking across a mountain plateau with short, scrawny grass, heather and moss. There were livestock here as well, and although these animals had much less to eat, barely enough in fact, they were all fat and glistening, and they looked healthy and strong. The dead friend explained, "This place is a parable of those who are happy with what they've got, even if it's not a lot." The two friends wandered on, far and further still. After a long, long while, they arrived at a quiet, beautiful lake. The surface was so bright and shiny, it was difficult to look directly at it. The dead friend stopped at the edge of the lake. "I have some business to attend to in this place," he said. "I must ask you to sit here and wait for me. I will be back in a while." He walked off, and the groom sat down to wait. It was a beautiful place, warm and sunny, and the air was full of the sweet scent of flowers. As he sat waiting, the groom became very tired, and in just a little while he fell into a deep, deep sleep. Eventually, the dead man returned and awoke his friend. "It was a good thing you stayed in the place where I left you," he said, "or else I would not have found you again. I will take you back the way we came." When the groom tried to get up, he found it very difficult, because he was covered in grass, bushes, and a few young trees, who had seemingly started to grow all around him and on top of him while he had been sleeping. But his friend helped him up and brushed him clean of bushes and grass, and off they went all the long way back. The dead man followed his friend all the way back to his own grave. There, they said farewell, and the groom walked straight back to the wedding feast. But when he approached the little farm where the wedding was held, he did not recognize the place. It had to be the right farm, but everything looked different. The buildings, the fields, and there was a great oak tree in the middle of the courtyard, which had not been there before. The people he could see around him, he did not recognize, not a single one. The only thing that looked right was the mountains around him. Everything else had changed. He looked around everywhere and asked everyone he met, but no one had ever heard about his bride, or his family, or his guests. Finally, he sat down next to an old man, the last person he had not talked to. the old man told him a story most people had forgotten, about a wedding that was supposed to have happened right here, where the groom disappeared after the ceremony, never to be seen or heard from again. But that had happened more than 400 years ago. After that, I do not know what happened to the groom, but I do not think he lived for very long. Why not? Well, because a fellow who have traveled to the afterlife and slept there for 400 years and then come home again would be returning to a world he no longer belonged in, with aching ancient bones. It was not long, I think, before he joined his friend again. Maybe he truly died the first time he stepped into that grave. I told your Grace the tale was a strange one. I came to think of it because it's about sleep and time passing and feeling out of place. It might not be a suitable bedtime story to tell of a man who slept his whole life away. I think this story must be very old. I have heard of others with certain similarities, of magical islands where time moves differently, and when you return to your own shores after a short visit to such an island, hundreds of years have passed. I have also heard stories of people descending into caves or ancient wells to find a whole other world there, with another sky and another sun, other lands with people and kings and monsters and everything wholly different from where they came from. They all travel through some kind of threshold and pass through into another world. Are your Grace feeling sleepy yet? Yes, the tea should start to take effect about now. I can't think of any more stories, except fairy tales well known and often told. When I was a little girl and could not sleep, my mother used to read those fairy tales to me, or sing sometimes. When that did not work, she told me to close my eyes and imagine a deep and endless forest. Her voice would guide me through it, and I would fall asleep listening to it. She added a touch of magic to her voice, I believe. Everything I know of my trade, herbalism and magic alike, I learned from her. And it is my experience, Your Grace, that magic is best used sparingly, to gently nudge someone in the right direction. We could try that, if Your Grace would be willing to follow some simple instructions. Very well. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself walking through a serene, moonlit forest. The forest floor is covered in deep, soft moss. Silver moonlight dapples the ground. The trees around you are silent, except for a mild rustling of leaves overhead. And now and then, a distant owl. The air is fresh and clear, but still warm, comfortable, with just a hint of chill. The light is blue and darkening. The forest is endless. No one can reach you here. You are feeling sleepy. Your arms and legs are heavy, and you cannot possibly take another step. Slowly, you sink down on the moss-covered ground. The day's tension melts away from your limbs, and the moss envelops you like a warm blanket, soft and still retaining warmth from the day's sun. The canopies move gently back and forth above you, and above them, barely visible, tiny stars are lit in the sky. Your eyelids grow heavy, and slowly you give in to sleep.